Hey, if you've got a Bible with you, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 25. If you don't, that's okay. We got the note sheet there, and we're going to jump right in. We're in part 2 of a series that we called last week, It Doesn't Have to Suck. And so the question we need to answer every single week is, what is it? Right? What is it that doesn't have to suck? And so it might look very differently for you and for me, but it has some things in common. So it typically is that thing that keeps us up at night. It's what stresses us out. It is what keeps you from engaging in relationships. It's what's getting you scared every time you look at your bank account. It's what's messing you up every time somebody slights you in the slightest way. It is what's sucking the life out of you. And so last week we talked about how it can be work, because for every single one of us, the average person's going to spend a third of your life at your job, whatever that job is. That job might look different from season to season in your life, but about a third of your life at work. And so last week I'd encourage you, go back, watch the podcast, man. We had some good thoughts on how do you engage work in the right way. Next week, just so you know, is one of my favorite weeks of this entire series. We're going to talk about marriage, specifically talking about how we handle ourselves in that relationship. And so you might be wondering, like, well, why are we talking about marriage? Here's why. If you are married, like myself, you know you constantly have to work on your marriage, right? All the married people, you can kind of nod along with me, right? If you're single, not married, you're mingling, maybe you're not mingling yet, but you want to be married, hey, you need to talk about marriage. You need to talk about it before it comes up, because it requires some preparation. And even on the backside, if you were married and you're not married anymore, it's still something important to talk about, because, hey, you might get married again, but even if you don't, you need to think about it in a way that you can process what's happened before. Right? The 2 weeks from today, we're going to talk about the it of forgiveness. That's something we all struggle with, right? Every single one of us, whether we need to forgive someone else or we just feel the need to be forgiven. Maybe you did something you really regret and you're thinking, man, I just can't get past it. We're going to talk about that 2 weeks from today. Today, though, we're talking about money. Now, when I say money, or when you read your note sheet and you saw money was on there, automatically what happens in churches, whether big or small, there's some very distinct feelings that come up, right? So the first thing that comes up for a lot of people is you hear money in church and you go, okay, is this one of those prosperity things? Like, is he telling me if I give $1 today, then I'm going to get like 1,000-fold back in the next 10 months, and I've just got to believe it. And if it doesn't happen, it must have been that I didn't believe enough, right? Maybe you're thinking that. That's not what we're talking about today. Some of you guys just think, man, a church just wants my money. They just talk about money because they need the money. Here's what I'll tell you. We run a really lean budget here, right? We do that on purpose, but here's the reason we talk about money. There's 2 reasons. Number one, Jesus talks about money a lot. You've heard this from me before. He actually talks about heaven and hell combined less than he talks about money, which you think is pretty weird, because Jesus, right, he has himself all about eternity, but he talks about money more than he talks about heaven and hell combined. Also, there's about 500 verses in the entire Bible about prayer, about 500 verses or so about faith. But when you talk about money and possessions, there's over 2,000 verses in the Bible that deal with those things. That's pretty crazy if you think about it. Here's the reason. Because just as it was true for them and it's still true for us, money is a big issue. Money is one of the top predictors of divorce. It's actually the top predictor of divorce in America. Money is something that we constantly stress out about, because we all go through life thinking, well, if I just had a little bit more. If you ask anybody, for the most part, statistically, what it means to be rich, they're going to tell you it's about twice what they make. So somebody making $100,000, if you ask them if they're rich, they're probably going to tell you no, but you ask them, what would it look like to be rich? They're going to say, oh, if you made about 200,000. Right? If you make 30K, you're looking at going, well, what's rich? And you're thinking, dang, dude, I'd kill somebody for 60K, right? Like, this is just how we do it. We constantly want more. So money is something that, honestly, we have to talk about, especially in church, because it's not just emotional for us, but for many of us, it's a spiritual issue. And so today we're going to talk about money, and we're specifically going to look at a parable, a story that Jesus tells in Matthew 25 to talk about the issue of money. So on your note sheet there, Matthew 25, we're going to read the entire story right now. We're going to come back and talk about it. But Matthew 25, starting in verse 14, Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven. He's talking about the way that God's kingdom works, the way that God has things work out for people, the way it happens for them. And here's what it says starting in verse 14. Jesus says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus puts an incredible premium, not on how much you make, not on how much you gain, but on your faithfulness with what you do with it. And so this morning we're going to talk about how money doesn't have to suck. But first, man, I'd like to pray for us, okay? Jesus, I thank you so much for how good you've been to us. God, for all of us, money is such a struggle. God, and it comes with so many strings attached almost directly to our heart that it gets incredibly difficult from time to time to talk about it without getting upset, without getting defensive. And so, God, today, I ask that you would just help us to put our guard down mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically. We think about the idea of money and it just makes us cringe or it makes us upset. God, I just pray that you would give us hope this morning to see that it is not up to us how much we make. We can work hard. We can do all the right things. You're not concerned with that, but you are concerned primarily with faithfulness. And so, God, as I'm speaking, I ask that you would just speak clearly to me and through me. And as we're all listening to you, God, help us to have the courage to follow through. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And you notice, AFC North, there's one team in first place. It's not the Cleveland Browns. It's not the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not the Baltimore Ravens. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. So we know, as of last week, that God definitely does answer prayer, right? Because the Bengals are in first and the Browns, not so much, right? So yeah, it's an Ohio team, but it's 2 very different parts of Ohio. So there's a good part, and then there's the Browns. So just 2 different things. For those of you guys who are Browns fans, sorry about that. Hey, I just want to tell you real quick kind of my journey with money, because here's the thing. I think a lot of times when a pastor or a teacher or whoever kind of puts themselves up front and puts you in a position to listen to them, what they do, the attitude we think is, oh, this is a guy who's got it all together and he's going to tell me how wrong I've been. Okay, that is not the case. In fact, my wife is in here this morning. She can vouch for that. We have had a pretty crappy relationship with money depending on where we've been at in our marriage. So let me just tell you, when I turned 18, went to college, moved away from Cincinnati, Ohio to Cleveland, Tennessee, the first thing I wanted when I went to college was a credit card. And I got a credit card, right? So I had about $1,000 spending limit on it. Got it through my dad's union, all that stuff. So went there, got the credit card, and my parents told me over and over, this is only for emergencies, right? This is only for emergencies. How many times have you told your kid that, or you heard that from your parent, right? This is just for emergencies. But it's funny when you get to college how you define emergency, right? So emergency, you might think an emergency is like, you get in an accident or you run out of gas or something happens. My emergencies looked a lot like Taco Bell. My emergencies oddly looked like they belonged in a Walmart parking lot sometimes. My emergencies included going on dates, getting gas when I just didn't want to spend my own money because I have to pull out cash, right? Later on, any cash for where we're going. Emergencies look like the movies. It looked like a lot of different things. And I remember my second semester at college, it kind of caught up with me because what I didn't think about is I'm swiping this card and there has to be a statement going somewhere, right? I was 18, 19. I didn't think about this. Well, it just turned out the statement was going to my parents' house. And so they look at it and they go, how in the world did he reach his spending limit? Why is he using this at all? So I got the phone call from my mom. I was really contrite. I felt really bad. Still kept doing it, right? This is just what I did. Then we got married. We were 21 when we got married. And about 5 months after we got married, we moved from Tennessee to South Carolina. And we decided when we moved, hey, we were getting a newer place. It's a nicer place. We don't want to use this old, stupid furniture that were hand-me-downs, right? So we thought, let's buy some furniture, even though we didn't have the money for it, because I was laying floors. Katie was student teaching, which I don't know if you know this or not. That means you make $0 from this. And we just thought, oh, cool. So we go to this place called Rooms to Go. First off, if it's called Rooms to Go, you should probably just go, right? Don't stay. But we saw Rooms to Go, and they said, hey, 2 years. No interest, no payment. And I went, 2 years? Dang, Katie will be a teacher in like 6 months. Surely I'm going to make more money then. Right? And we just thought, well, we'll do this. So we get the furniture. And then you realize after you get it home, I see the same stuff at Big Lots, and it's like 1/3 the price, right? But we got the Rooms to Go, got the credit card, did that. Also, we had the Best Buy card. Because here's what happened. We had a white SUV, and I had a white MacBook. So we were loading up my pastor's kids in the car one day, and Katie decided, not going to blame her, but it's all her fault, decided that while she's loading the kids in the car, she would put my white MacBook on the hood of the white SUV. So as we're driving down this country road at about 45 miles per hour, I hear Katie next to me go, oh no! And so what do you do if you're driving? You slam the brakes. So I slam the brakes, and like slow motion, I kid you not, I see the MacBook just go, hit the ground and just slide. And Katie's going, oh my gosh, I think it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And we open it up, and it's like shattered, right? And she's like, it's not okay. She went driving around the rest of the day. I went to lunch with people, and I'm like, what you going to do? But we thought, well, let's get a new one. We'll just get a new one. We didn't have the money to do that. So Best Buy, same thing, man. 2 years, no interest, no payment. Like, how good is this? This is going to be incredible. We can have it all, right? Who needs to wait to get things? We don't need the money, right? We got love, and we got credit cards. And so we got the MacBook. 2 years, no interest, no payment. And I remember, though, but one day we kind of realized, like, it's like the light bulb went on for a second, and we realized, like, dang, we're poor. And at this point, I went from laying floors to, like, actually making a salary at a church, and Katie was teaching at a school. And so we had 2 salaries, we had benefits, and yet it seemed like we were still just as poor as ever. And we're sitting there like racking our brains like, why is this? Like, why are we paying our bills and then having literally $0 or less than $0 in our bank account? Like, why does this keep happening? And we realized, like, oh man, it's all this money we're paying on credit cards trying to get these things paid off. And we added up the numbers one day. It was super depressing. We don't remember the exact number. I just remember it was at least $12,000 of what we call dumb debt, right? So student loans, we don't lump into that because, man, if I lumped in student loans into dumb debt, I'd probably be crying right now, okay? We have 2 college-educated people that did not work for that college education. So we added up like $12,000 worth of dumb debt. We thought, well, let's get out of it. And so we decided we were going to take the Dave Ramsey, the Financial Peace University class. I would recommend that to anybody. You don't have to agree with everything in there. It just gives you a great framework for how to see it. But we decided to do that. And right before we were taking the class, because we started taking it like in December or something like that, November of that year, as we're still working on paying things off, we're still hovering right, no matter how much we pay, we're still hovering right around that same dollar amount, how much we owe. All of a sudden, that Best Buy card that was 2 years, no interest, no payment, I figured out what happens after 2 years where you make no interest and no payment. You know what happens? Some of you guys know. You're laughing because you're thinking, oh, we did the same thing, right? Or you're thinking, well, I didn't do that, but this person I know, they were stupid and did that. All of a sudden, this like $900 and something, almost $1,000 lump sum just goes right onto our account because you didn't pay it then, but since you didn't pay it off in 2 years, you get to pay it now, right? And I remember sitting there thinking, I was sitting on the love seat in our house with the old green carpet where we were at in the time over on Archwood, and I remember thinking this thought, like, man, money just sucks. Like, this sucks, life sucks, this is terrible, I can't handle this. I was so frustrated, I just wanted to yell, I just wanted to scream. I was so mad because even when we were trying to do the right thing, I couldn't get away from it. Like, money just sucks. And then we went to our first class for Financial Peace University. And Dave Ramsey said this thing that has forever changed the way I see money. He was talking about it, and he talked about the idea that money is amoral. Money is amoral. In other words, money is not good or bad. Like, it is literally a piece of paper that's been dyed different colors. It is not inherently good, inherently evil. It's not like people, right? It is amoral. It has no morals at all. With money, you get morals with it depending on how you use it and how you see it. Right, so you can use money for good, but that does not mean that money is good. You can use money for bad. It does not mean that money is bad, but it only gets the meaning that we attach to it. Right, you realize that one day somebody could wake up and just decide, oh, this money is worth of no value at all, and you just got paper in your house, right? Like, money is amoral, not good or bad. It's all in how you see it. And I realized for the first time, I had a terrible way of seeing the money that had been earned by me and given to me. The way I saw it sucked. It wasn't that money itself sucked. It's the way I saw it that sucked. And this morning, the story we read from Jesus that he tells his followers, it's a made-up story that he tells. He does this all the time because he's always trying to convey spiritual truth through story. He's trying to help them understand it. There's a guy that was a lot like me in that story, and he's the last servant, right? So where we get the story is the master is getting ready to go away for an extended period of time, and he's got these talents that he's going to give to his servants. Now, just to give you a frame of reference, one talent in their day is roughly equivalent to about $1,000 right now. So that means he goes and he gives 5 talents to one. Guess how much money that is for you math scholars? Apparently no math scholars in here. That's $5,000, right? I struggle with math too. So $5,000 he gives to the one man. He goes to the next, he gives him 2 talents, which is how much? $2,000. You guys are learning math, education happening right now. And then he gives the last one, he gives him 1 talent, which is $1,000. And he gives them to them. And here's the thing. A lot of times, like, I'll be honest, when I've read this story, and the reason we read the whole thing on the front end is because I want to help you get a bigger picture of it. I read this, and the master almost sounds like a jerk. Do you guys think that when you read that? Like, he sounds like a big jerk. Like, what are you talking about? You didn't invest my money. You just kept it safe? Cool. Go to hell. That's what he tells him. See, here's the thing. The master, though, he's not giving them money just to hold on to it and keep it safe. He makes a point to say he's going away for a long time. He's giving them a lot of money. And while he's gone, he's entrusting it to them that they'll invest it and work with it like he would if he was there. So he's saying, I'm giving you this money. It's an opportunity for you. But notice first off, whose money is it? It's the master's money. They were entrusted with it, but it did not mean it was theirs. And here's the thing. We have to feel the same way about the money we do or don't have. That everything I have, it is not something that I've earned in and of myself. Because guess what? I make a living. I work at a school. I'm a chaplain. But I did not grow my own brain to be able to be a chaplain. Right? I did not create my own voice and my own vocal cords where I could get up and teach leadership classes and convey information to students. At the end of the day, everything I've earned is absolutely from God. So the master gives his money, and he takes his money, gives it to them, and he says, here's an opportunity. Every dollar you have is an opportunity. Every bit of money you have to see it as an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? So the Bible says, Jesus says the master goes away for a long time. And these men immediately, 2 of the 3, they begin putting the talents, putting the money to work. And so the first one, he goes and he starts trading it almost immediately. He takes those 5 talents and he puts it to work. He's investing, he's trading, he's doing what he can to make more money. The second one does the same thing. He follows suit and he sees the opportunity that's there with what he's been given. He doesn't have as much as the other guy. The other guy has more than twice as much as him, and he doesn't get bitter and just do nothing with it. He goes and he starts to invest. How many of you guys know it gets really hard to not be bitter when you find out what other people make? Have you ever felt that before? Like, dude, I'll be totally transparent with you. I get really frustrated at that. Like, when I look at, even as a pastor, I look at all the work that goes into this, and I love it, right? This is not me getting up here complaining, but I look at everything and I go, man, we're doing so many cool things, and I'm working just as hard as other guys, but then I'm hanging out with dudes that are making a buttload of money. I can't think of a better way to put that. It gets hard to not get bitter when you compare, but here's the thing. The second servant, he doesn't get bitter. He just goes and he starts investing what he's been given. But the third servant, notice automatically what he does. He just puts it in the ground and hides it. He just keeps it hidden because he's afraid. So when the master comes back, he goes to his servants, and almost one by one, they line up to come and see him again. The first man comes up and he says, Master, you gave me 5 talents, these $5,000. I worked it. I invested it. I did what I could. Here's another $5,000. And notice what the master says right away. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. He doesn't say, well done, good and successful servant. Well done, good and rich servant. Because once again, I don't applaud people for being rich with my money. God doesn't applaud us for being rich as if that creates this great spiritual status for us, or as if the goal is to get us all rich, as we've heard many times in churches. Because it's not our money, it's his money. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. And then he says, you have been faithful over a little. Now I'm going to set you over much. Notice, the opportunity for the first servant, it pays off, right? Because he sees the money he's been given by God as an opportunity, and God says, cool, I can trust you with more. The second servant comes up and he says, Master, you gave me these 2 talents, these $2,000, and when you left, I put it to work, I put it to use, I traded, I invested, I did what was necessary. Here are 2 talents more. And the master says, literally the exact same thing, well done, good and faithful servant. Not successful, not rich, not even talented, not charismatic, not outgoing. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, now I will put you over much. Now here's what I'll say. I am not a believer, like we said earlier, in the idea that if you give $1, you're going to get 10,000 back, because this is just the way God works, and it's a universal law, and he must do whatever we tell him because we've got God completely figured out. I think that's stupid, all right? But here's what I do believe. I do believe there's something to being trustworthy and faithful with what you've been given that shows other people and God that you're ready for it. So I just spent 2 days at a conference that was all about intersecting faith and entrepreneurship. So it's me as a pastor, I'm one of the few pastors there, and a bunch of people who are starting businesses, and they're pitching these businesses. And the one thing they talked about is you're going to get more people investing in your startup business if you've got a good relationship with them and you prove you're trustworthy. Do you know why that is? Nobody wants to give somebody $10,000 that doesn't have a business plan. Nobody's going to give somebody money that doesn't have a way that they're telling them, this is how we're going to do with it. Here's how we're going to put it to work. Like if I went up, we fundraised for this church before. We still do it from time to time for different things we're doing. I never went up to somebody and said, hey, I need $1,000. What for? Just need it. Give it to me. I'm doing God's work. That's not the way it works, right? So these 2 servants, they take the opportunity given to them by their master, and they're shown to be faithful with it. And then the master says this, he says, come enter into the joy of your master. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, here's the thing. You're going to see 2 very different dynamics between the master and his servants, between servants 1 and 2 and servant 3. But here's what I want to contend with you. I really believe, this is conjecture. This is not absolute. You can't take this as like gospel, okay? I believe how each of those servants saw their master mattered. So the third master, he says he's afraid. We'll get to him in a minute. But this first 2, man, they are so excited to show their master what they've done with what they've been entrusted. And look at how quickly, not only does he commend them, but he welcomes them into his joy. He welcomes them into his presence. He says, come into the joy of your master. How we see God and the opportunities that he gives, whether big or small, it makes a difference. I've seen people, and I've done this before, where God gives me an opportunity and I'm upset at how little it is, or I'm scared by how much it might not work out, and it just causes me to do nothing. How you see God and the gifts that he gives, whether big or small, it matters tremendously. Now, that does not mean that you won't second guess yourself. That does not mean that you will not doubt yourself, because guess what? We're all imperfect. You will absolutely doubt yourself. Can I just be totally honest? I have never doubted myself as much as I have in the past 2 years. Because for the past 2 years, all I've done is put myself in spots that are risky. All I've done is put myself in spots that are uncomfortable. Right? You guys have probably done this before. You've had things happen like this where you leave a salary and benefits and the comfort where everybody likes you. And every time, for me personally, I touch a mic, everybody's like, that was so good, right? And then all of a sudden we have people meeting in my house and my dogs are running around and wrestling with each other in front of everybody. And I go, this is uncomfortable. And I doubt myself. So much so, I'll be real. When I was at the conference this week, The second day, I felt like a giant piece of garbage. Like, not sickness, just I felt bad about myself. And I'm hearing all these guys with all these big dreams and all this success they're having, and I'm automatically just looking at it going, oh man, I'm not, do I have what it takes? Like, am I cut out for this? Like, am I good enough for this, right? Because anytime you do something that's bigger than you, you're going to doubt yourself. Anytime other people are counting on you, you're going to doubt yourself. I'm like, man, am I cut out for all these things I'm trying to do? Am I cut out for it with my family? Am I cut out for it with the church? Am I cut out for it with my job? Am I cut out for it with my friends? Like, am I cut out for it? Can I make it happen? And this guy said something that I thought was really cool. It's totally extra. He was talking about some advice somebody gave him, and the guy literally said, you're not cut out for it, but you're being cut out for it. You're not cut out for the opportunity you have. You're being cut out for it. And see, these servants, these first two, they saw the opportunity that their master had given them, and they realized that this opportunity, whether it was a $5,000 opportunity, a $2,000 opportunity, or even less, it was an opportunity. So the master says, come enter into the joy of your master. But the third servant, the way he sees his master is incredibly different. The third servant, he goes up to the master and he begins to, instead of telling him, here's all the great things I've done, he looks at him and says, hey, let me tell you something about you. Have you ever had that kind of conversation before? Or all of a sudden you walk in a room and somebody's like, hey, you might not know this about yourself, but I'm about to tell you who you really are. I'm about to tell you what you're really like. I've had this happen a bunch of times, right? Where people all of a sudden they feel like they can tell you like, hey, you just don't know, but you're terrible at this, or you're bad at this. The servant goes up to his master and he says, Master, I knew you to be a hard man. I know that you gather where you don't scatter seed. I know that you reap, you take from where you didn't sow, where you didn't invest. You're just a terrible person. Like, I know you to be a hard man. So because of that, I was afraid. Notice he makes excuses. How often do you hear people who don't have money make excuses? Now, I'm not rich, okay? So this isn't like you're talking to a guy who makes six figures telling you like, all them poor people. No, like I'm like lower middle class, like middle class at best, right? If it's just my income, I am straight up po, right? So here's the deal. It's not like I'm telling you like I'm rich and you need to figure it out. But dude, I'll be real. It frustrates me to death, and I truly believe it probably frustrates the mess out of God when people look at it and they go, well, here's why I'm poor. It's somebody else's fault. He gets up and he automatically makes excuses. He says, because you're like this, I was afraid, so I went and I hid your money in the ground. Here, take back what's yours. Now, if you're the master and you've given this incredible opportunity, how do you feel when he hands back that money right away? You're thinking to yourself, man, I sacrificed for you. I took a risk on you. But you're telling me I'm the bad guy? I think for some of us, maybe you're in a job that you don't like or you don't appreciate, or you're making money but you're not making what you hoped you'd make. And we automatically just start to gripe. And I'm guilty of this, guys. This is not coming from perfection, okay? But you just gripe. And I wonder how many times God's hearing that and going, dude, you're missing the opportunity. You're missing it. I've got you over a little. Let's see if you can be faithful with that so you can be faithful with more. Man, don't spit in the face of the God who's giving you an opportunity. But he says, I know you're a hard man. So I hid it in the ground. Now notice, when the master speaks back, I should say to the servant, he says, you're wicked and slothful. You're wicked and lazy. In other words, he just cuts through the excuses. He says, you can't blame anybody but you because you weren't faithful. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing, guys, our life is measured by our faithfulness, by nothing else but faithfulness. Let me ask you a couple questions. Man, are you being faithful with your present circumstance? Like something as simple as, are you paying your bills? Or are you saying, I'm not going to pay them because I'd rather have this and do that other thing. I'm just going to leave it alone. I've been there. I've done that. I've had the conversations in my own head to say, I'm deciding to pay that later because I want this right now. Are you being faithful with your present? Are you taking care of the people around you that you're supposed to take care of? Or are you asking them to do without so that you can have what you want? Are you making excuses for yourself? Are you being faithful with your present? Are you being faithful with your future? Here's the one thing I'll tell you. Once again, I'm not rich, but I've talked to some rich people. And here's the funny thing. You know, most of them don't end up that way on accident. Like, rarely does somebody just fall into being rich. And when they do fall into it, guess what happens? They fall out of it really quickly. Like, I can't remember the exact stat, but if you look up how many people win the lottery and are broke 15 years later, it's astounding. But are you being faithful with your future, or are you just waiting to strike it rich? Are you just waiting to get lucky sometime? Are you taking, even if it's just $10 a week, man, are you saving anything? Right? Are you investing at all? Are you putting anything ahead for some kind of retirement, some kind of security in the future? Once again, don't make a lot of money. We give to retirement. Are you looking to the future? Are you being faithful with your future? And the last question I see is, are you being faithful to your God? And here's where I get it, dude. Rubber meets the road. This is the biggest struggle for people when it comes to church. But I'm just telling you, I believe the Bible, okay? I believe that when Jesus says something, he meant it. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have to figure out some of the meaning sometimes, but when he says something, he means it. So in other words, you can't take John 3:16 and say, that's the Jesus I love, and then take where Jesus says he's going to judge and go, no, I don't believe that one. It's kind of all or nothing with the words of Christ, okay? And so Jesus says this one thing. It's really quick, and he says it really fast in Matthew 23. Just want to make sure I got the reference right. He's speaking to the Pharisees, and he's talking about how they're so careful to follow the rules, and they're so careful specifically to tithe, which tithe means a tenth, okay? So if you've heard that in church before, that's talking about 10% of your income. And I know automatically some of you guys are like, shutting it off, okay? Just hear me out. But Jesus looks at them as he's criticizing them for their just absolute zeal to follow the rules. He says, you're so careful to tithe all these things. You should tithe. He affirms the activity. He just doesn't affirm their heart in it. Now, you're sitting here maybe thinking, well, like, you can't, that's 3 words. Like, that's 3 words. You cannot tell me that I have to do something based off Jesus saying 3 words. But here's where I want to take that and maybe flip it around for you. Your life constantly changes with a sentence as little as 3 words. Like, I remember the first time my wife told me she loved me. Do you think that changed my life? Do you think that changed my behavior? Absolutely. I can think of times where people said, I hate you. Does that change your behavior? Does that change how you see the world? I can remember when people would say something like, that was good, or that was great. It changed my behavior. It changed my attitude. I can remember also doing stuff and people going, dude, that was awful, right? That was 4 words because I threw dude in there, but that was terrible. It absolutely changes things. Jesus says, you should tithe. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Once again, this comes back to the faithfulness thing. Are you being faithful with what you have? Because the biggest lie we tell ourselves is, I will tithe when I make X amount of dollars. But you know what studies show us is that the more money you make, the less you tend to give away. Now, there's some exceptions to that. But some of the poorest people in our country give away 6 to 7% of their income. And they're legitimately poverty line. We cannot think that I will do what's right and what's faithful later. At some point, you just have to decide, I'm going to be faithful even when it's uncomfortable. Are you being faithful to your God? Now, I know when we talk about this idea of your life being measured by faithfulness, that sounds difficult, right? Because for most of us, life is going to be long. Not for all of us. Some of us, it won't be the case. But for most of us, life is going to be long. So we're asking you to measure your life over the long haul, right? To say, are you being faithful? And that might sound unfair. It might sound tough. It might sound scary. But here's what I love about Jesus is he does not ask us to measure our life in a way that his life was not measured. In other words, the greatest thing about Jesus was not the miracles. It wasn't the teachings. None of those things. It was his faithfulness to do what God asked him to do. In fact, right before his death, the night before his death, he's praying in a garden called Gethsemane. And he's praying, and he's so overcome with emotion that the Bible lets us know, and this actually is a medical thing, it does happen, that when you're so overcome with emotion from time to time, that he was so overcome that the sweat was coming out, and it was blood coming through his pores. He was very much present in that moment. He felt that moment. He felt everything that came with it. And he begins to pray to his heavenly Father, and he says, God, if you can, please let this cup pass from me. Now, maybe that doesn't sound normal to you. Here's what he's saying. Father, if you will, please don't make me die the way I have to die tomorrow. If you will, please let this cup pass from me. Let this go away. But then he finishes it up here in the last part of that verse. He says this. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus' life, his death, his resurrection, all of it was measured by his faithfulness to God and his faithfulness to us. For every single one of us, man, we are not asked to do anything that God himself was not willing to do for us. Our life will be marked by faithfulness. How do you use what you've been given? For Jesus, it was the exact same way. Jesus, how are you going to use the life you've been given on this earth, the time you've been given on this earth? I'd like to pray for you guys if I can real quick, and Steve's going to come back up and lead us here in a song, but I'd like to pray for us before we do that. And so if you will, just kind of where you are, just pray with me. Jesus, I know it is so easy so many times to be overcome and overwhelmed by something like money. It is so common for us to get so caught up in it that it just causes us to stop dead in our tracks, to get worried, to get overwhelmed, to get upset. And yet, God, you're telling us that our life is not going to be measured by how much money we make. It's not going to be measured by simply how much money we give away, by how much status we get with the money that we have. Jesus, you're telling us through your stories and through your life that our life is measured by our faithfulness with what we've been given. And so, God, my prayer is that you would encourage us to be faithful. God, as much as we want to feel significant, and there's nothing wrong with that, significance pales in comparison to faithfulness in your kingdom. You tell us that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first, that if we want to be the greatest of all, we have to be the greatest servant of all. And so you're saying, once again, our life is measured by our faithfulness. So God, help us today. Give us the courage to make the decision to be faithful in all things so that one day we can stand before you like your servants in this story, and you can say to us, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. Now in eternity, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Because Jesus, ultimately at the end of the day, what's most important is the day that we'll stand before you. The day that we're going to have a conversation with you, and we're going to be like one of these servants. We might be able to come up to you and say, Jesus, look at what you gave me, and here's what I did with it. Here's how faithful I was. But God, unfortunately, some of us might feel really tempted to be like that third servant, to say, God, I knew the entire time I was here that you were a harsh God. That you weren't fair. And so I took what you gave me and I buried it. Jesus, don't let us be like that servant. God, let us respond well to you